Just last week, there was a Supreme Court ruling that came down 6-3 decision. Clarence Thomas wrote the opinion on sort of overturning a New York law that regulated who could and could not get a license to carry. And we want to talk about the implications of that decision with BRADEN Langley Outdoors Academy on YouTube. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, praise be to God. We're glad you're here. Thank you for your time. So this was kind of a big deal. I mean, the Dobbs case overshadowed all of these big deal decisions that came out, but this was one of them. Tell us about this decision and its implications.
Yeah, you're correct. It's actually, in the last decade, it's the biggest deal, so to speak, from the Second Amendment side of things. This is a very interesting situation because it stacks on top of the Heller decision from 2008. Just kind of a real high-level primer. You're talking about something that, in the Heller decision, they came out and decided that you had the right to keep a firearm in your home because D.C. was basically challenging that right. Well, they left it open and said in the home specifically. So then the gun control side, the gun regulation side said, well, you said in the home. You didn't say outside in public. So now they competed with the public safety. They said, because Heller said in the home, we're going to leave that alone, but now we can go to public safety because there's a public interest. And that led down a very complicated road of judgments, a lot of things, which included means in testing, lots of things, which complicated the idea to have a Second Amendment right to bear arms, even though it says keep and bear arms. Well, the Supreme Court didn't say bear arms. They didn't reinforce that, even though it's there originally, right? So that's what led into the Bruen case. And in the Bruen case, you're talking about the Supreme Court left no rock unturned. They said, no, that's absolutely a right. It stacks on top of Heller. They referenced to the Heller and McDonald decisions in that same SCOTUS case. They really drove this home. It's a massive deal for multiple reasons.
So New York is now trying to step back and figure out how they can continue to keep some gun control. What are they doing right now?
Well, so that's the interesting thing. It's not just New York, but specifically because New York was the catalyst to this lawsuit, they are putting forward new legislation because they had something in place called proper cause. So basically, the whole crux of the problem was the state decided if you could or could not bear arms based on their opinion of if you needed one or not, which is blatantly unconstitutional, which is the whole finding of Bruen. So they had to rip out their concealed carry law around proper cause, and they have to put a new one in. So they're going to be voting on that today. I actually did a video of this on my channel last night, and they're doing things like requiring training, enhanced background checks, which is ironic because they already did the background checks up and down, left and right when they purchased the firearm. And then they're also talking about potential safe storage mandates that are more in the home versus out of the home and how you actually store it. Now if they actually do that, again, we haven't actually seen if it passes yet, but this is a very quick special session that Kathy Hochul put in place. We're going to know more today or tomorrow. But from a standpoint of actually in New York, you're now looking more like the carry laws of Ohio before they went constitutional carry, which is a shift to the right side of the spectrum, still in the gun control category, but they are shifting.
Yeah, Braden, I remember when I was living in California, I would peruse some of the certain forums online to figure out what exactly would be a good cause to be able to get a concealed carry license while I was living there. And it was, there was all kinds of different people posting, well, I posted this reason and it seemed to get denied and this one got approved. Was there any sort of, it was just the opinion of the people to decide what was a good cause for the people applying?
Exactly. That's exactly what it was. So there was not a set standard, which if you're talking about constitutional rights, that's kind of one of those things that everyone has. There's kind of a set standard. If you have the ability to be alive and have those rights, then you shouldn't have someone declaring if you can or cannot use them.
Yeah,
and that was the whole point. And it literally came down to a politician or a official saying, this is what's going to happen. Sorry, you can't have it because you didn't prove just enough cause. And that's not for them to say. I mean, quite frankly, that's not what we're about.
The big story this morning is California has apparently, our bad. And the Los Angeles DA leaked the data, private information of of permit carriers in, I think it was L.A. County. There was like over 2,000, almost 3,000 people's information was made public. They've since taken it down, and they've sworn to uphold the privacy of these people. But golly gee whiz, so sorry, our bad. But I mean, this is what we're seeing. It's like this petty fight in order to circumvent the Constitution. Is this just stuck to blue states, or are there some purple states in between that are also playing this game?
This is much more on the deep blue states as of right now, because you have, if you look at it from a complete spectrum, you had the far blue states that are putting in what's called may issue determination. So they would say you might get a permit if we deem it necessary. Well, that was really in only 6 states. Okay. The other states involved, some have red flag laws, some have different criteria, but you're not really seeing this exact same push in states like Pennsylvania, for example. Pennsylvania has a pretty healthy debate of constitutional carry or red flag laws. Like, that's one of the things that they're debating right now. So they're kind of in that purple middle zone. Now in California, with Rob Bonta specifically, he is as anti-gun as you can get. And for them to accidentally leak that, at the same time, they've just come out with a decision unraveling their entire concealed carry scheme. There's got to be some sort of litigation, some sort of consequence to that, because they're sitting judges, they're probation officers, there's police officers. There was a lot of very important things that were leaked in that. Homes, names, addresses. I mean, New York did something very similar a little while ago, but it seems to only happen in those places that are not gun friendly, which I find interesting.
Yeah, what if ATF would accidentally leak their digitized records that they receive from closed gun stores? That would be thousands and thousands and thousands of citizens all across the country that would just accidentally find their way to the internet. It would be kind of a crazy situation. So what's the long game here? Are they going to have to retool their strategy in order to get the kind of gun control they want?
They're in the middle of that right now. That's exactly what's happening. So when you look at the broad spectrum of what the gun control movement versus the gun rights movement has been going through in the last 10, 15, 20 years, what they'll typically do, and this is a strategy, it's not like it's published somewhere, but you can kind of see what they're doing. They'll go into states that are more Democratic leaning, more blue leaning, that are more likely to allow them to infringe upon the Second Amendment. They'll have court systems which use something called means in testing, which is the way that they determine if you can get a gun or not get a gun, or if a ban's okay or if a ban is not okay. And that's one of the reasons they're so upset about Bruen, is because in Bruen, before that decision came out, there was a 2-step process. You had to look at the history and the text, which was the Second Amendment, and then you also had to look at what's the outcome for public safety, what's the ends to the means here. And that's how they were doing AR bans, that's how they were doing handgun rosters, that's how they were doing all of these things which were infringing on the Second Amendment, because the circuit courts were upholding them using that standard of testing. Well, in Bruen, Thomas came out and said, 2 steps is too many steps. It's 1 too many steps. You need 1. You need to look at history and you need to look at text. So when you look at history and text, it's pretty clear. Is there a prerequisite or a historical precedent for Second Amendment rights in this country? Yes, there is. Is there a text that says the Second Amendment is valid and keep and bear arms? Yes, there is. End of conversation. So what they've done is they've gone into blue states and they try these.
Hold that thought for me. I cut you off right before the break. Sorry about that, Braden. We're grateful for your time. You want to pick up where you left off?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So basically, what we were kind of talking about is what they've done in regards to the question of what's the long game here. What the gun control advocates will do is they'll try into like little policies. They'll kind of do bigger policies in deep blue states where they can get away with it. And then if they stand up to scrutiny, utilizing that means in testing that Bruen just struck down, then they'll move it out to national, move out to other states. Like Colorado is an example. Everything was kind of isolated to the East Coast and the West Coast. Colorado started to turn blue, and all of a sudden the gun movements that were proven to work in California, Oregon, Washington, New York, all those states started to go into Colorado. So the good news is the Bruen case kind of shut down a lot of the options that they have. Because of that, they've changed that testing standard. But that's kind of where we're at. So long game, they're running out of options to infringe, because once the Supreme Court speaks, they can't keep doing that same thing. So eventually they're going to run out of the little incremental moves they're doing, because that's what they do. Boil that frog real slowly, not quickly. So eventually they're going to run out of the incremental, and you're going to see a bigger push to do much larger things, which will also ultimately run into resistance.
Isn't it the case, though, that even if you're allowed to have a handgun, like California, for example, you're okay, even if you're allowed to have it, good luck using it and hopefully stay out
Right.
of prison, even to defend yourself.
100%. That's exactly right. I mean, if you look at the Prime Minister of Canada, who just said recently, you don't have a right to defend yourself. That's kind of where the kids don't have that right written in their constitution. He openly said it on an open interview.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the background of a lot of the politicians who are going against the gun movement, they're going against gun rights. That's what they've said. They've kind of gone and incrementally added policies where there's a penalty that you face if you don't do the certain right things in a defensive situation, like the duty to retreat, for example, in some blue states. If someone invades your home and you have a way behind you, you are obligated to run away before you defend yourself. And if you defend yourself before running away, you will be in trouble. You have to prove yourself when they're in your home. And that's an example of that, to what you're talking about.
Wow. You know, that brings to mind, I'm curious to get your take on this because I know that there's a lot of advertising for sort of carry insurance. Just in case you ever have to use your weapon in self-defense, there's companies that will, you're paying insurance into, and I think they represent you, in a court of law. What do you think about these sort of companies? Do you think that people who carry from day to day should have something like this?
It depends on the state that you're in. I mean, just as candidly as I can be, because you've got different laws that you're facing.
Right.
Right. So in a stand your ground law state, you have different obligations and different responsibilities than you do in a duty to retreat state.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the biggest thing that I could advise on that, it's never a bad idea to cover your bases, but sometimes you have more of a need to cover your bases based on where you live geographically. Yeah. Right. Like if you live in Florida, for example, you have a stand your ground law. Well, if you feel that you were threatened or your family is threatened, you can respond with deadly force because there's a direct threat. You aren't obliged to retreat. Mm-hmm. But in other states, you do. So, I mean, it's one of those things where analyze it from your own perspective. I think it's a good idea to have that support in court, to have someone to call when something goes wrong, and that's what those services do. I would definitely say if it fits the criteria that you're in need of, I would go for it. They usually provide a lot of education as well for your location. So it's something to look into 100%.
I was just thinking about this video that I remember seeing from a few years ago from France, who also has these crazy gun laws there, where even if you're allowed to have it, good luck using it and try to stay out of prison. Well, they were having a major immigration crisis there. Muslims were coming in, but there were some in the Muslim crowd there that were attacking French citizens, and there was a video of these guys chasing these women, and this guy pulls out his gun and stands his ground, and the whole time I'm thinking he's going to defend these women and going to go to prison in the long run, and that just seems bizarre to me. So I want to talk about the disconnect, even in our country. When you see politicians, even President Joe Biden is fond of saying, you don't need more than one shot, to kill a deer. And the Second Amendment was never about deer, was it? I mean, I love deer. I eat some deer every year. I love deer. They're delicious. I like filling my freezer full of it. It's fantastic meat for my family. But the Second Amendment has nothing to do with deer.
No, the Second Amendment does not. It's a tool. It's a tool for what you're using it for, whether you're using it in 1776 style for defending your freedom, or you're hunting, putting food on the table, or you're defending yourself. It's just like anything else. How do you get to your job every day? You drive a car. How do you get your coffee? You use a coffee maker. It's a tool application of what's needed, right? And so to your example of why would you not be able to defend yourself? I think it speaks to something a little bit deeper from a centralized command and control kind of thing. This is kind of a power scheme, and more in my opinion. It makes no sense if you're going to say you can't defend yourself with a firearm, but you can call the police who bring firearms to defend themselves. So the problem is clearly not a firearm. The problem is clearly that someone else outside of your control is using that firearm. Because if firearms were the issue, you wouldn't have police officers armed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's there's a lot of, I say on my channel all the time, the policies that the gun controllers and typically the left will have, they don't stand together. They do not work. Like, for example, in one case, you could have anything that we can do, we can infringe upon a Second Amendment, anything we can do to save one life is worth it. But on the same token is how dare you touch Roe v. Wade.
Right. Yeah.
it's like, and you'll have that conversation in the exact same the same sentence,
Right.
and it will literally be, and I'm right on both of these, and how dare you challenge me on it?
Mm.
And well, I'm going to challenge the concept that you're putting forward, because you're saying that we can infringe on the Second Amendment. We don't need guns. We aren't in the militia anymore, and if we can save one life, it's worth it. But on the other side, if you say, well, let's just kick this Roe v. Wade thing back to the states, it's like riots, nights of rage. How dare you?
Right.
These aren't lives. These are zygotes.
Yeah.
These are clumps of cells. And it doesn't make sense. I mean, I'm not trying to get into a different debate of it, but
there's
when you look at those two
there's
things,
a schizophrenia here. There's a hypocrisy that's clear to us, but not clear to them, which is bizarre to me when you can't have rational conversations. In the UK, they put the police department posts pictures of all the knives they have had to confiscate. Kitchen knives are most of them, by the way. So are we going to outlaw kitchen knives because that's the weapon of choice there? There was the guy who ran through the victims at the Waukesha parade. Are we going to outlaw cars? I think it's clear that man has demonstrated, due to his sin nature, that if we're hell-bent on killing and maiming people, we will find new and creative ways to do that. It seems like we are talking about Band-Aids instead of the gushing wound.
Well, yeah, and you just hit on something else that is going towards a deeper conversation, right? In my own personal belief, the hearts of men are corrupted. They're going to find a way, kind of like what you said. If you are intent on doing, in my opinion, what would be evil, then you're going to find a way to do that evil. If you're in UK, well, I've got all these kitchen knives around. Well, we're going to start banning kitchen knives. That doesn't make any sense. So now you can only have a 3-inch kitchen knife?
Right.
It seems like we're just progressing down the road. It doesn't seem like we're stemming this at the baseline issue, right? And I don't know, you can't legislate morality. You can't legislate the hearts of men. At some point, you just have to look at the deeper underlying issue of maybe we have a culture issue versus a tool issue.
Mm. Yeah.
Maybe.
I believe there's a war for the soul of America right now. And it's going to be interesting because the country is being clearly divided up, and the left is falling on the left, and the right is falling on the right, and the middle is becoming more and more scarce by the day. I mean, in the last segment, we were talking to our friend from Florida, and we were illustrating how these governors, these Democratic governors, are wanting people to move back to the blue states because they provide abortion. And I'm sure they would lump gun control into the same conversation. They would say, come back because, we don't allow people to have guns or use them in their defense. It just seems like our country is headed to a precipice, and I see this as one of those key issues.
I would agree. So I agree with portions of that. I have a little bit different stance on the political precipice piece. If you're looking at policy decisions and policy preferences, yeah, blue states are going to have less gun rights and they're going to have more abortion rights, and red states are going to have more gun rights and less abortion stuff, or abortion availability. So I think that we are absolutely polarizing, but I think we're breaking it off of a federal level. I think we're going down to a state level, right? So everything in the past 20, 30 years has been driving towards, we need broad sweeping federal legislation to control this, to do this, to get this big, broad, bloated federal government. And it's breaking down. If you look at the gun rights, it literally just said states you cannot infringe, but it's still your decision. It's nothing federal. If you look at abortion, you say, hey, abortion rights, it's no longer Roe v. Wade. Now it's up to the states. You guys figure it out. I think we're seeing a decentralization because the one broad-based federal model is running into issues because it's not a one-size-fit-all situation.
Yeah, but when do they ever like to give back power?
Well, when does anyone like to give back power?
No, never.
No one does. Right? That's again, you're going back to the corruption in the hearts of men. Like men don't like to give up power. If you look at that from a political, historical precedent, if you look at that from humanity, evolution, if you look at that from religion, like all sorts of cases, men don't like to give up power and autonomy.
No, they don't.
They just don't. And a lot of it comes down to humbling yourself before whatever you're talking about, but that's a different thing. So in my personal opinion, I understand the raising temperatures. I see it, but I think that the middle is a lot bigger than people are giving credit for because you're only hearing the extremes on both sides. I think the middle is getting to a certain point where you're going to hear them tell the left to sit down. That's too far for this area of what you're discussing. And I think you're also going to hear them on the right say, sit down, that's too far. We need to chill. I think the temperature needs to be lowered significantly in this country. And I think that's the way it's going to happen. That's just a hypothesis. Obviously, I'm not a national political figure from a standpoint of like in the Republican Party or the Democratic Party or whatever. That's my hope anyway.
Sure.
I can see it happening.
Yeah. Well, we didn't have much time because we're down to it now, but we didn't have a whole lot of time to talk about those red flag laws. I find that interesting because you'd think on the surface that would be a good thing, but there's certainly a big loophole there to be abused, and we've discussed that. But we'll have to have you back, BRADEN Langley from Langley Outdoors Academy. 2 videos a day, huh?
Yes, sir. There's a lot of gun rights we got to put out there. That's one of those things, man. We've got things that are going on across the nation, and then we also look at the themes and the trends so we can really dive in to see where they're going so we can get in front of it. Yeah,
praise be to God. Check them out on YouTube, Langley Outdoors Academy. BRADEN Langley, thank you for your time today. God bless you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right, that's going to do it for hour number 1. Praise be to Jesus. Thank you all for joining us. If you can and you are able to, join us in the second hour. If you're not able to listen on the radio, you can always hang out with us on our website at grnonline.com/CDT. A lot more news and stories to cover, plus our game show is coming up in the next hour and the after show where you get to comment directly. Otherwise, we'll see you back here tomorrow morning.